I tried to make some new settings, but I don't know. I may have done some some weird changes to the settings. So, but in any event, good. We are just about a few minutes from 4 o'clock in the afternoon and 7 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast time. So this is obviously also a good, you can say, good training in how to actually work with the US on time differences. So always keep in mind that the customers on the Pacific time zone are 9 hours behind you when you are in Denmark. So that always creates a little added spice to the collaboration. So yeah,
it is, and I should say it is one of the things that you and I often talk about, and something that we often talk to customers about. There's no point in saying that you must be on the East Coast because it's easier to set up a meeting because of the shorter time difference. If you're in the US and if you're serious about being in the US and really engaging with the market, you need to be where your clients are. And our collaboration here clearly shows that even though there is a 9-hour time difference to the West Coast, it's ultimate. It's easily possible.
yeah.
It's going to be 7 o'clock in the morning. I've been up, I've had breakfast, I've had coffee, which is why I'm smiling. So
That's good. Perfect. Yeah, that's good. Super. We're just missing a few more that have signed up to attend today's Tuesday talk, where we will talk about the pricing, which is something completely different than time zones. But in any event, I am super excited to share some of our experiences in this particular field with the attendees. I just made a LinkedIn post today where I found a quote from one of the big success stories that we always look towards. And even though those people were surprised about the number of cash or the amount of cash it actually requires to make it in America, but we will talk about that later. So yeah.
But much like time zones, pricing is one of these things you do need to get right.
Exactly. But with that, it turned 4 o'clock. So in respect of the people who showed up on time, should we just start? Let's get started. Mm-hmm. And Thomas, if you introduce yourself.
My name's Thomas. I am the leader of a consulting firm based in Los Angeles, working with European companies engaging with the US market. We do have a focus on environmental sustainability, since we are the leaders in environmental sustainability here in Los Angeles. And of course, California is currently the 5th largest economy in the world, but growing a lot faster, and will probably surpass Germany in 4th place by 2023.
Wow, fantastic. And I am Charlotte Nytoft, and I also run a consultancy business. I'm located in Denmark, as most of you know, and I focus on companies that are about to establish their business in the United States across sectors. I don't have a narrow industry focus, so it is basically the companies that are about to start their venture in the United States, and the companies that want to make a shift because something that they have done for a couple of years have turned out not to be the right setup for their US market entry. And for those of you who have followed us in the past, Thomas and I, we pick a topic and we talk about this for about half an hour, and then you obviously are welcome also to put a couple of questions in the chat afterwards. So, but the format of the Tuesday talks is actually that we pick a topic that we know that is super essential for Danish businesses going to United States, and in general for European businesses as well. And we are sharing the experience we have on this particular topic. And I will say also that this is being recorded. A few attendees just showed up, so I need to say in order of a good sake that we are recording as usual. But Thomas, why is the price is right so important?
Yeah, you beat me to it. There's a famous, for those of you who aren't familiar with, there's a famous show in the US called The Price is Right, hosted by Bob Barker for, I don't know, 40 years or something like that. And the format was members of the audience would be called down to the stage, and Bob Barker would famously say, "Come on down to the Price is Right." An audience would guess at a whole array of products, and they would have to guess, and whoever got the closest to the actual price, it might be a car, it might be an entire kitchen with all the appliances and everything else, whoever got closest to it would win. And sometimes it seems like companies engaging with the US market are engaged in this game of the Price is Right, because it seems like they're trying to guess at the price. And you do need, it's not easy, but you do need to plan a little bit for it. But if you don't get the price right, you can, you price yourself out of the market because your price is too high. But mostly what happens is companies really do want to engage with the US market, and they end up pricing themselves too low. And it's a good, it helps them in the beginning. They're ultra competitive because their price is really low, and they get an order from a company and they're like, yes, we got started in the US market. Then they get another order, maybe they get another client or another few clients. Then they realize, well, gosh, now we're in a situation where we need a little bit more infrastructure in the US. And unfortunately, then their prices now they realize the price is too low. They can't really afford the extra infrastructure. And that infrastructure could be, they need an office, they need some administrative personnel, they need a warehouse, or they need to have salespeople who they didn't have in the beginning because maybe they were maybe they got lucky. I like to call them accidental exporters, where someone calls you and you at your office back in Denmark and says, hey, I saw your product and I want to buy them. And that makes it seem like the price that you set originally is going to work for you. And you need to just, before you say, yes, we'll buy, yes, we'll sell something to you, and this is our price in Denmark, and we can definitely sell it to you for this price in the US as well. You just need to sit back for a minute, even though it's exciting, and think about, where are we going to go, and what is our ultimate plan with the US?
Yeah, you're perfectly right, because the low price and the fast first few customers, of course, always super intriguing and really shows, yeah, we have a market and we have interesting customers, and this could really be an interesting marketplace for us. But like you say, oftentimes I see companies price themselves too low in the market, and it's basically, you can say, because you can look at the pricing for a new market in two different ways. You can look at it in a, you can say, value-based price setting, or you can look at it in a margin-based price setting. And obviously, if the value in the market is lower than your margin-based price setting with all the cost that is associated, then you shouldn't even start in the market. But most likely you would actually experience, and for instance, the American market will for in some instances actually have a higher price point than the European market. And you really need to go out and see, what is the market willing to pay for this product, even though you have this customer who have reached out to you and want to buy your product because he or she has seen your product on a trade show or at your website. Because today everything is also so transparent that it is super difficult to actually hide your price structure from customers on the other side of the pond. But you really need to figure out, am I actually really capable of selling my product in the market, and what is the market beyond this one-off client who just reached out to us? What is the market actually willing to pay for our product in the market? And I have seen companies actually, if you can say, fail to even do a basic market research by simply seeing, what are the competitors selling this particular product for? I mean, if the competitors are selling the products for the triple price of what you can sell for, it's probably because the market is willing to pay that type of price, and exactly. It will be absolutely stupid to go into the market with a price that is this much lower, because then there's definitely something that you haven't taken into consideration in your pricing for the market. Yeah,
there's an interesting example from Louis Vuitton. which of course is an ultra high-end luxury product, but they go to great lengths to price their products at a similar price around the world, so that you like price arbitrage and just get on your private jet and fly to Copenhagen and be like, aha, well, if I go to Copenhagen, I can get everything a lot less expensively, and I can load up my jet with a bunch of new bags and fly back home to wherever you're coming from. But you know, you mentioned coming from Denmark to the US, and there are often some differentiation in the products, in the appearance or in the perception of the product, that your product is in some way superior, and it may be intrinsically superior, of course, but you need to recognize that, and the company exporting to the US needs to do its due diligence and to determine what is the value of our product, and is there any additional value in the US market for our product that we don't see in our home markets.
Exactly, but the say the risk of pricing yourself too low. I've heard a number of companies say, yeah, you know what, we actually do have a dealer in the United States, but let's just sell directly to the customers, and we will then save the 8, 10, 15% of whatever the dealer is taking as a cut for, or a commission, or adding to the price, and why that is so. You can say, I wouldn't say wrong, but a wrong perception is really the function that the reseller, your distributor, your agent, or whoever it is, the cost of acquiring a new customer, a new account, does have a price. And just because you are selling directly to the company, to the customers, you really don't, you can say, save that money. You're just actually shifting the money, or the cost center, so to say, the cost from your dealer and onto your own sales organization. And what have you seen, Thomas, in those cases where people think they are, or companies think they are actually saving a lot of money by going directly instead of going through a dealer?
Well, I've only seen that costing them in the long term. It's a very short-sighted cost savings, and even if there is an opportunity to sell direct, the longer term strategy almost always includes having either an external sales organization, as a dealer or representative. And the United States is so big that while you may have the opportunity to sell direct, your direct sales may be focused in a particular area, or you may be selling in to one-off, a client here, a client here, a client there. But if you want to really focus on a particular area, you really need sort of boots on the ground, and you need somebody, and it could be your own people, or you could contract with a sales organization. And in the longer term, it's always a losing strategy, because if you don't take that into consideration, well, first of all, you wouldn't be able to pay someone for it, because you're now pricing yourself out and pricing against yourself, really. And the other thing is, if you do go with a two-pronged sales strategy, well, the sales agent or the representative won't want to help you at such a low margin, or such a low percentage gain, that again, it's going to cost you in the long term.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, if you obviously want to set up your entire own sales organization, that might be obviously a different case. But I'm just really concerned about this very short-sighted strategy that we can save a lot of money by actually cutting out the sort of the middleman, because the function has a cost. And I see over and over again that the companies does not really price, because the price at the end of the road, so to speak, so the price towards the end customer should basically be the same. It just depends on who is actually absorbing the cost for acquiring and distributing and doing the after sales and doing the warranty and so on and so forth. And there you might actually either do it yourself or do it with a partner, or at least you definitely need to set a price for that service, and not assuming it's just because you're doing it yourself that it does not have a cost, and you can simply sell it at a lower price to the end customer. So yeah, and also because you mentioned, that's a super good point, because the complexity of the market, because you may have these first orders from food and beverage, for instance, and then you figure out, okay, that's the sales channels in that particular customer segment is so and so. That is maybe multiple layers of sales rep, but you may also experience you have a different strategy towards, for instance, the life science industry, and they have potentially a completely different sales channel strategy. So there, of course, your cost for doing the sales would be entirely different. So have you experienced this, that customers actually have a totally different sales approach towards different market segments?
Not only a different sales approach, but also a longer sales, just a longer sales, just the process to selling in. And you mentioned life science, and it might be, you might have had a break in some way to get into the food and beverage industry, but then you're looking at life science, and that might be a more profitable market, which is also why you need to sort of find out what are your likely target markets, because each market segment, it easily is larger than your entire home market. Yeah. And so you want to focus on where are you going to get most value, but there may be not only be a longer sales process, which then is more expensive, but also is more specialized, which is one of the reasons that you would want to have somebody who's local and on the ground. But it might simply be that it's physically in a different location. So we were working with a company not too long ago that was in the aviation industry, but specifically for business and private jets. And that entire industry is centered around Wichita, Kansas. And the company wasn't exactly sure where Kansas was, and definitely didn't know where Wichita was. But they thought they were a technology company and they wanted to be in Silicon Valley. And it's sort of like what you're saying, the food and beverage industry is spread more broadly around the country, it seems, whereas the life science industry is gathered more in clusters. And although there are clusters, the clusters aren't next door to each other.
That's right.
And that perception is also important to understand from a European perspective, where especially if you're coming from a Scandinavian country, where you can drive from one end of the country to the other in the same day. And it's just not reasonable to expect to cover the entire United States from day one. And that's also one of the reasons why pricing is so important. You need to sort of have the longer perspective that you should start you'll likely be starting in one region. And your longer perspective is you're going to expand beyond that. And there's going to be a cost associated with that, and that needs to be built into your price basically from day one.
Yeah, because again, you would not want the sort of the end price, or the price that is the customer is paying in the market to be too much of a difference. It should be somewhat the same, no matter because which industry you're servicing. So you really need to put all these perceived costs, and also if one particular industry is you're going to say the sales cycle is maybe 6 or 9 months and requires like 20 visits and so on and so forth, then it's really important to understand just how many visits does it require to close an order, and how often are we going to see them afterwards in the after sales, and so on and so forth. So it's really important to understand, say, how expensive is it actually to acquire and retain a customer and have them purchase with you again, if that's relevant. So these different the size of the market, the different sales channels, and what type of cost structure these different sales channels are having for your business, that is really crucial to understand.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point also, is like what are the other things that you're adding,
Mm.
and sales is obviously is one thing that's really important, and having sales, and maybe a company could say like, well, listen, we have sales staff here at our main office, wherever that may be, and from our European headquarters, we serve several different countries, and we can certainly serve the US as well. Well, first of all, of course, you need to take into consideration the time difference in serving these customers. European employees will certainly be requiring more pay if they're going to be available at midnight, when, because it's like, what is it, 5 p.m. when, business hours normally might end is 2 o'clock in the morning, Central European time. And if you're going to have a customer service center or a sales center that's open at that hour in Europe, that's going to cost you more money. But what are some of the other functions that are going to be involved? And one of the things over here, if you're in consumer products, I mean, I experience this all the time. I just bought shoes online from a company that I wasn't familiar with, and turns out that their sizing is slightly different. I get the shoes, they get shipped here for free, and they have free returns, and they make the process super easy. Now, this company is actually Brazilian, as it turns out. I didn't even know this, but they make it super easy. A few little work on the computer, and things get sent back, and they are already sending a new pair of shoes clearly before they've received the ones that I sent back. And I had to go through this twice because their sizing was really off. And so what is it in your product? It may not be shoes, but what is it in your product that customers will come back to you for? Is it under warranty? How will you deal with warranty issues? How will you deal with after service? And who's going to do repairs if it's an industrial product? If you're selling equipment for dairies in Wisconsin, and something breaks, and even if the warranty is as simple as, we'll send you the spare part, you fix it, and here's a video that explains to you how you attach this piece. Well, you still have to have the video in English and have it available. You have to have somebody who can respond to it, and you have to ship the parts. So there are a lot of small things to consider that over time definitely will add up.
Yeah, exactly. And then that is sort of the you can say the more advanced price setting components, if we should talk about, because there's of course also the super basic components like shipping and duty, and these you can say these costs are today spinning entirely out of control.
Yes.
And also just the cost of doing business, the insurance market, just to make a simple and applicable business insurance for your company in the United States, if you're setting up your own subsidiary, has increased dramatically over the last few years. So these are the costs you obviously also need to take into consideration. But simply just really figuring out what is actually the landed price for your product in the United States. What does it cost for a customer to actually purchase your products from a warehouse in the United States? And a lot of Danish companies actually really do not have their logistics partner as their best friend when they are going to United States. They are somehow perceiving that you can just put stuff on a pallet and ship it X works towards United States, and then the importer, the customer, will need to deal with the import duty and the freight and the logistics, and you can just cash in on the invoice. But the challenge is, if you do not invest in understanding the cost of bringing your products to the market, having them available on the market for purchase, that again takes away your ability to understand what is actually the price in the market, and what is your product worth in the market, and is it priced right? So you definitely need to understand, the import duty. Is there anything in the past years of shift in the import duty regulations that have caused your specific product to have a different import tariff, and what is actually the you can say the regular export pricing for shipment and so on, and what are the pricing today in today's weird market that unfortunately does not seem to cool off anytime soon. So these are some of the pricing points you really need to understand. Also, if you're going to a trade show in Germany, for instance, and you are there and there is an American company approaching you, instead of just shooting out a few price points, then you really need to understand, if you're engaging in such discussions, what will your product actually be at a landed price in United States.
And this actually brings up an interesting point from a previous Tuesday talk, where if you are in the fortunate position that you happen to be somewhere not even thinking about the U.S. and a U.S. buyer approaches you and they say, well, we really like your products and we'd like to buy this and this. And if they're sort of picking apart your product line, and they pick out some elements that you feel doesn't represent you, the conversation, it's a good place to start, but it should be considered a start to the conversation. And of course, pricing is really important, but we discussed this in an earlier Tuesday talk where the conversation with the American buyer should also really be, well, listen, this is what we want to present to our customer. Is that something that you think that you can do with us? Then it's really worth your time to go and investigate the price.
Yeah.
To see, well, what is it that we can do now that we've found that this company is going to be a good business partner for us, not just someone who buys a random product or who buys like a portion of a product, but doesn't really present the vision that we have for the clients that we have in mind. And although the discussion was in I think in clothing, but the discussion that discussion holds true in a lot of other industries as well.
It does, and it's really important to not just see the product as, you can say, the only product. You can say it's sort of a solution where it is really important that the customer is subscribing to your warranty system and your upgrades, and you have original spare parts and so on and so forth for an industrial component. So that is definitely super important. And also, one of the things that are important to understand is also, what does it actually, even though you try to keep your business very super lean in the United States, you definitely have some cost associated. And I was just briefly touching on the insurance, the cost for insurance, but also the maintaining of intellectual property rights, your trademarks, your patents, if you have things of that nature. Sometimes I have experienced the companies are really surprised of these, you can say, annual invoices that suddenly shows up, and maybe they haven't really calculated this into their pricing structure. But these are all small elements of cost that will add on to your, ultimately adds on to your sales price. So what have you seen of good examples of the type of cost that people usually forget?
Well, you bring up patents, which is really important, and of course, famous examples of that is Lego, which has very, very aggressively protected its patents, which I believe now may be expired, but very, very aggressively pursued that legally, through the justice system, or through the legal system. Some people don't think it's the justice system, but hiring lawyers to protect this. And it's important to understand how the differences are, that just because you own the trademark, it doesn't mean that nobody else will use it. It allows you to prevent them from using it, and there's a cost associated with this. And I've seen companies where they've had discussions about going into the US market, and they've spoken to a bunch of people about it, and someone caught wind of it and actually registered their trademark in advance of them really committing to the decision, and it delayed their entry into the US by quite a bit of time, because what ends up happening with a trademark is you can sit on a trademark and not use it for, I think it's up to 3.5 years.
Yeah.
But you know, a trademark isn't that expensive to maintain. Patents are significantly more expensive, but really not addressing those costs. And for instance, going forward, and even though insurance, general liability, product liability insurance, and those things have gone up, it could be a lot more expensive to not have them. And that's where I've really seen some unexpected and some pretty dramatic costs, where something has happened, and it may not be something dramatic, but something's happened where your products got in the crosshairs, and something happened, and you have to deal with it. And if you'd had insurance, which would have been a relatively low cost and a low and predictable cost, there would have still been costs associated with dealing with it, but not having planned for it. Sort of just like not having planned for your pricing being appropriate for the market. You didn't plan for the other things that belong with a market strategy.
Exactly, but it all sort of circles back to doing the proper analysis to begin with, and doing your strategy for the U.S. market, and most important is you know, a lot of the aspects of for your strategy for the U.S. market are obviously important, but it would be super sad if you really had a great strategy for the US market. You knew that your customers would be interested in your product, but then you would simply experience such a demand for your product that you would not be able to actually, you haven't priced yourself in a way so you actually can afford to grow the market as the demands increases. So that would even be the worst scenario ever if you experience it.
That would be terrible.
Yeah, I actually do have a Danish company that had to pull out of the United States entirely, because they simply could not, for all these reasons we talked about today, they could simply not follow the demand of the market. That they could not afford to grow in the speed of which the United States market picked up. So yeah. It's 4:30. If there is anybody having a few questions, then definitely feel free to put them in the chat, or put them in the chat box, and we will answer accordingly. So do you have any final comments to make on the pricing point?
Well, of course, I mean, you know, not because I do this, but the best way to start is, if you're thinking about the US, or if someone has approached you and says, hey, we're in the US, we want to buy your product, ask lots of questions. Ask your friends, call you or me, and ask questions. You know, we're always willing to have an initial conversation with someone, and to get people started in the right direction. But get advice from someone who has experience in the field, and who's seen some of these problems before. That's just essential. But also think of this: if someone comes to you and says, we'd like to buy your product, they're probably not alone. They just happen to be the one that found you, and you are probably a gem that they've discovered. So think of that when someone approaches you. Don't think like you've won the lottery. It's actually the other way around. First customer who found you, they've won the lottery, and you know, now you have to figure out what's the prize and the price going to be.
The price is right, and also the simply, if you are in a situation where you actually can buy some of the products from your competing companies out there, you know, simply go and do so, because you oftentimes will find, and particularly particularly in these niche products and high-end consumer products, which we do have in Denmark, there you actually can find a niche market that is willing to pay much more for your products than you will experience in the European market, because the competition for these types of products, for niche market products, for really high-end quality, is so much greater in Europe. We have a much fiercer competition in Europe, and there may be a market position for you to gain in the United States market, and there may only be few competitors that are making something as exclusive as you are doing it, and there you really need to understand that you don't price yourself too low, and also because you can say the luxury that you are associating yourself with as for instance, a consumer, if you are buying products from overseas, from an exotic place like Denmark or Germany or wherever you're buying it from, that also has a price significance to it. Don't underestimate the you can say the brand value of your products as well. That has a price in itself.
And the perception of the user or the buyer in the US is more important than your understanding of your product. One of the funny examples is French fries are actually not French, and the French are like, well, there's a Belgian invention. I don't understand why they call them French fries, and it's just sort of it's comes from the end of the World War II, when American soldiers first encountered these things, and they're still called French fries. And it's just the perception that it's a French thing, and it seems like that. But a lot of European products, like you say, they'll be like, well, it's a European product, so it's better, it's exotic somehow. And sometimes they certainly are. I would buy a German car over an American car any day of the week. But like you look at in environmental sustainability, water treatment. Well, water treatment is significantly more advanced in Europe than it is in the US, and it's something that a lot of European countries and a lot of European businesses are looking at. With the perception in Europe that the green transition is now underway because of Biden's presidency, and they're looking at these opportunities, and it's definitely something that there's some extra value because it is a European product.
Exactly, that is a good point. So if do we have any? There's no questions to be asked in this very important topic. So yeah. But I hope
it must just be because we're answering their questions before they're being asked.
Yeah, that's right. So in any event, I mean, it's super important, the pricing, and if you want to look at pricing, then definitely, and if you have tangible products, then do not hesitate to reach out either to me or to your logistics partner to actually find that landed price on the market. Because if you just start there, if you just have an idea of what is your price worth or what is the cost associated with bringing your products to the United States market, then you're definitely a good step ahead of the game. So that is definitely where you need to start, and then you can add all the other costs as well, but definitely do yourself a favor as a company to go and investigate these topics and all these.
And make sure when you do that, you do take into consideration that there's an East Coast, a West Coast, and everything in between. So when you do talk to your logistics provider about the landed price, even if your first client happens to be on the East Coast or in the Midwest in Chicago or something like that, if you calculate a landed price for Chicago, that's almost certainly not going to be the same landed price as it is for Houston or Dallas or Seattle or Los Angeles. So take into consideration the size, the scale of the US. it's an opportunity, but it's also a cost factor.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's a good point. Super. On this note, I think we will say thank you very much to everybody who showed up, and you guys may have a wonderful evening in Denmark, and Thomas, you may have a wonderful day ahead of you on in California. And we look forward to see you for the next Tuesday talk, end of October.
Thank you much. Thanks, Charlotte.
Okay.
Thanks
Take care.
everyone for joining us today.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.